Headlines, the podcast that covers all things sports business, along with our super agent to the stars, Hadley Engelhart. I'm your friendly host, Matt. Thanks for joining us. I'll remind you, we are available wherever you get your podcast. Search Deals and Deadlines, and you'll have this waiting for you when it drops each and every Friday. We're also available on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, Mr. Hadley, Happy New Year.
You too. Missed you.
Right, well, thank
you.
you.
Had good holidays.
It's nice to be missed.
Hello to everybody out there.
Did a lot of eating, drinking, and gifting, so it was good.
Good.
So we come back. We have a busy show for you today. We're going to talk to Marcus Walker a little bit later from the W Group. He consults with both players in college and with universities on the deals getting done when it comes to NIL, so we'll pick his brain about that business that continues to explode a little bit later on. We'll also talk about the NFL coaching carousel, and we're looking at Coach Poach. It's happening again potentially in the NFL. Yes, I know. This
does?
I've heard stories.
Okay.
We'll pick your brain on that in a minute. Here's where we want to start. The story that broke the internet earlier this week, the lawsuit at Fox Sports. It starts with a hairdresser who is accusing several on-air talent at Fox of sexual harassment, including maybe the biggest charge of them all, that Skip Bayless, she claims, allegedly, that Skip offered her $1.5 million for sex. Then the fallout of this in the lawsuit talks about Joy Taylor, who's an on-air host at Fox, who potentially got her job by having inappropriate relationships with a Fox exec, Fox on-air talent. This is great made-for-TV drama, except none of them want to talk about it. So your lawyer background, what would be the first element of this that would jump out to you?
Well, first of all, you've made it when you have hairdressers. And you've really made it if you allegedly paid a hairdresser $1.5 million for anything.
Right.
Listen, this is a big mess, obviously. It affects some prominent figures in sports. Skip and Joy are two well-known faces of sports. And so, it's going to get uglier before it's going to clean up. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, we have a lawsuit. And so if it continues, there'll be court documents, there'll be depositions, there'll be people under oath saying stuff. My gut tells me this thing is resolved financially from both an individual basis and from the network, because they don't need to air any dirty laundry.
Anymore.
Correct. But any real facts to get out there, right? Right now it's all allegations. And so not sure if this is a money grab or there's some legs to it. And, the thing with Skip, I think, is more real because that's someone alleging stuff that did happen to them. They were assaulted or allegedly. The Joy stuff, I'm not sure what the big news is. If in fact some of those things happened, she didn't break any rules. She didn't break any laws.
Well, there are two elements of this that I find interesting, and you know this like I do. There is a media and a PR part of this, and the old no such thing as bad news. Sometimes, FS1 and Fox are getting a lot of attention, but Charlie Dixon is the executive who was mentioned that had a relationship with Joy Taylor, and all of a sudden she goes from local radio host and, as described by some bartender, to now on-air host at Fox.
And that's how you made it.
That's exactly right. I was a bartender, and I had sex with a network executive, and I landed an AM radio show. But here's the question.
Not good sex, obviously.
Well, you should talk to anybody in my past, you'll find that out. So the question becomes, Hadley, how much digging now does Fox do? Because I'm sure you're going to hear things like internal investigations, and they're going to start turning stuff over. It's not just the lawsuits that happen. It's the digging around now to find out what other inappropriate stuff, because there could be jobs on the line. There could be, as I said, a PR spin that you don't want to make it look like you have some reckless behavior going on. So there's some other fallout here.
Yeah, listen, I think they're going to do some research and investigation about this, but how deep do they go into it? Not sure. I think the Skip Bayless stuff is something that's more serious. There's true allegations. So I think they'll dig deeper into that and kind of work through that. And then what the fallout is, it is what it is. Again, he's a big on-air talent.
But he's also not there anymore.
Correct. So I think that it's something that will have more to it. The Joy stuff, I think, is going to go by the wayside, and I think people can bitch and moan about why she got promoted, why she didn't. At the end of the day, she does a great job at what she does, and she's very well liked. And wink, wink. And I think that it'll be very interesting how it plays out. I don't think it'll be anything crazy, where somebody's up and fired or there's a major thing going on. I think most of this stuff will be at the headlines for a little bit, and then you won't hear from it again.
It is chum in the water, though.
100%.
In the media business. I will say maybe the best example of somebody looking good is nothing but good stuff about Colin Cowherd, but behind the scenes, just on the lawsuit itself, talking about how on the up and up he was and how he treated everybody so I guess of all the bad, he got some good press out of that. Okay, so let's transition. Earlier in the week, we went through NFL Black Monday, which is the day after the season we start seeing coaching and GM changes around the league. We saw one in Jacksonville. But I think the bigger story, Hadley, becomes some coaches who are still employed but are drawing interest from other teams. So I want to talk to you about just the operation and how this works. So there was the Bears who were interested in Mike McCarthy, but Dallas turned down any opportunity to talk to him or discuss some kind of deal for Mike McCarthy. Is that how that one works, where a team will call and say, we want to talk to him, and then if something happens, we want to talk about compensation for poaching your head coach?
Yeah, well, so first of all, it's very rare. This whole Mike McCarthy thing is more the exception than the rule. What you normally see are guys like Ben Johnson, who's an OC, who's getting a promotion, right? And so this is a lateral movement going from one team to another team. And they have to have permission, contractually speaking. It's while you're under contract. The contract's still in place. And, you know, more times than not, an owner says, okay, you can go ahead and interview. I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes in Dallas. I mean, there's a lot of talks about, you know, people want Jerry Jones to remove himself as the pseudo GM and let other people make decisions because the team's going nowhere. He's the owner. He can do what he can do. But it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, because now that potentially gives him leverage. If you're not going to let me interview, well, then I want an extension. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, not being in the inner circle of that, that's the interesting one. The other ones are not so surprising what happens. The only one I think that surprises me, and it upsets me because I've had clients on this side of it too, is where, you know, and we'll take New England. They fired that coach
Gerard Mayo,
right after the game. And to me, it's not the way to do it. It's the wrong message because, you know, they won that game, you know, and so it's something that, you know, I think you wait until Monday, Tuesday of the next week, and you have a sit down professionally, go through the pros and cons of the season, and you're still going to make the same decision. Mm-hmm. But I think from the optics, it's much better. I think they're in a panic, because I really think they're looking at Vrabel. And when Vrabel already interviewed with the Jets and now he's interviewing with other teams, I think they wanted to make sure they knew that that job was available to him.
I just have this feeling that's done. I just think it's a done deal.
It would make sense,
right?
You
make that move with Gerard Mayo, and we can get into fair or not, timing or not, but the NFL is such a big business that they want to get something right. But let me circle back to the Cowboy thing for a minute, and then we'll talk more about it. Mike McCarthy was thought to be on the hot seat, right? So if you're Dallas, I'm a little surprised that you wouldn't do a hard reset. All right, we'll play some hardball. What do you want to give me for McCarthy? Because I'll go back to the John Gruden, which is the most prominent of it. I don't know you would get that kind of package, but let's see what the Bears are willing to offer. Would you? I'll float a first-round pick to see if you're willing to bite. If you don't, all right, give me a second and a third-round pick. And if I'm Dallas, all right, I'll say I don't want to release him, but I will. I'll get the draft compensation. Then I'll do a hard reset myself, and I'll do a full court press on Ben Johnson, or I'll talk to Mike Vrabel, or I'll talk to any of these guys. I'm kind of surprised Dallas's stance on this one.
Yeah, but maybe they did do that, right? Maybe they did. Ryan Poles and Jerry Jones had this conversation. Like, you know, if we're going to give you permission, it's only going to lead to a job or not a job. If it is a job opportunity, what's the compensation?
So they already had that, you think?
I would think so, that they had that. They set those parameters of, hey, if you're going to interview him, we don't know exactly where it would go, but we have an idea, and maybe they couldn't have a meeting of the minds, said, well, therefore, I'm not going to give you permission to do it. So I think there's something to that.
What do you think about Pete Carroll, who is going to interview with the Bears? I think what we've seen is the age stuff, maybe not as important as it once was, which brings me to Belichick, which we'll talk about in a second. But Carroll's the same age, I believe, as Belichick. He's in his early 70s. With the Bears, with a young quarterback, would they want to do something where they say to Carroll, who looks great, he's in great shape, but he's still 72, we're planning on a 3-year kind of a situation with Carroll with a coach in waiting? Is that something?
Yeah, I don't think they go about it right away and say, hey, you're coming in and we're already looking to replace you. I don't look at it that way. I think what you look at with the Bears, the Patriots, the Jaguars versus the Cowboys, we'll say, the other three have young, up-and-coming, rising quarterbacks. The Cowboys have Dak Prescott, and you could say what you want. He's very overpaid. He hasn't won, and I don't know if a coach wants to take that job with having Dak in place. I think the more attractive jobs are with the younger quarterbacks that they can cultivate and mold and develop, and they can grow together. So I think those jobs become much more attractive. The interesting thing, which is some of those kept their general managers but got rid of the coaches.
Like Jacksonville. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And Chicago. Yep. And, you know, so it's very interesting to see how that plays out because, you know, you look at a lot of things. The Colts are keeping everybody in place. The Giants are keeping everybody in place. So there's things that the ownership sees that they like the direction, they like the way things are handled, and I think that all these different factors that come into play are great to watch. It's drama, right?
Sure.
Because we don't know what's going to happen the next move.
Let me ask you one more. So there was a report or a rumor, not sure what they are anymore, that the Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, who's got 1 year left on his deal, there could be teams like Mike McCarthy, who we just mentioned, that are interested in trading for Kevin O'Connell. I always think that you slimy agents are the ones
I would agree with
who
you
release that, and they're like, all right, Vikings, we've got interest in our guy. You better pony up. I would think, though, based on what O'Connell's done with his team, this being the latest example, I wouldn't need to create any more interest in getting a deal done. So why do you think something's not done? Do you believe that the agent is behind floating a story like that?
Yeah, I think there's something more to it. I mean, listen, teams are they could be fishing around, and there may be a little bit of truth to it, but at the end of the day, he's going to stay there. He's going to sign a new deal. The interesting thing, what they're going to do is they've got a good dilemma, if you want to call it. What do they do at quarterback? Right? Do they bring Sam Darnold back, or do they go with J.J. McCarthy because, he's the future? But if they win this whole thing, a lot of things are going to happen there. So I think this next month is going to be fascinating with pro football, with the coaching carousel, and see what happens. And it'll be very interesting to see, who ends up where. And again, I think the more attractive teams are the teams with the young quarterbacks and teams that have owners that are standoffish, that don't helicopter. And I think that becomes the more attractive place for a new head coach or a retread head coach, guys that have done well and, failed and now are doing well as a coordinator. So I'm excited to see what happens, and, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
All right, coming up later, we'll talk about incentives. The NFL finished Week 18 with some really interesting guys getting to some incentive numbers and others not being allowed. We'll talk to an agent about how they perceive that, plus players who are not willing to take pay cuts. What is that conversation like? We'll pick Hadley's brain about that a little bit later on. Coming up next, Marcus Walker from the W Group. He consults with both teams, universities, and players on the big business of NIL. We'll pick his brain about that next. As we continue this edition of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley Engelhardt, I'm Matt Chernoff. Thanks so much again for making this podcast part of your, hopefully, daily lineup. We're here every Friday. Get your chance to download the pod wherever you get your favorite podcast. And again, we are always available to you on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. Let's welcome in Marcus Walker from the W Group. He's got one of these jobs in this unbelievably exploding industry around NIL, where he's consulting with both universities and players. He's kind enough to join us this week on Deals and Deadlines. Marcus, we appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about just some of the big differences from where this whole idea began, which was not that long ago, to where it is today. What have you seen as far as some of the differences in NIL today in the landscape of college football?
That is a great question. My entire career. So let me start from the beginning. I'll make it quick. But played college football at Eastern Washington. I was a prop. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day. Yep. So I was a prop. I just didn't have my business in high school. But then
a prop 48.
Yes. So I ended up going to Eastern Washington instead of junior college, and I actually did really well academically there. Graduated with honors. And it was just because I had a good mentor that kind of kept me up to speed and on top of my schoolwork. So ended up getting into it's called the McNair Scholars Program. It's for underrepresented groups to essentially get their grad school paid for, and it's grad school prep. It was between New Mexico State for grad school, Cal Berkeley for grad school, which I got into the PhD program for African American Studies, or Arizona State, where I would work in the athletic department as a graduate assistant with academic advising. My original plan, I wanted to do research and teach. So I was going to go to Cal. The grad school was paid for, but it was too expensive to live. So Arizona State was the default. Got in there, started as an academic coach, and found a passion in just helping the young men, because I worked with football. The young men I worked with, just kind of do more, not just academically, but off the field as well. So that's always been my purpose. My dad was a college football coach back in the Mike Price and Ryan Leaf days at Washington State. So I grew up in this business. I know everything about it. Wanted nothing to do with X's and O's. I wanted to work, in administration and off the field. So after I finished grad school, ended up being the academic advisor for football, moved into player development because, that's at Arizona State, and was there, I was at Arizona State 2009, I think, until 16.
So you were there with Ray Anderson was still there then?
Yes, I know Ray very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you know him.
Very well.
So I left in 2016, went to UC up with Frost, was there with Frost for a year and a half, went back to Arizona State as director of college personnel. So this is kind of my first role into the personnel side, the evaluation side, and the roster management side. And so I was there with Todd Graham for his last year, and then Herm came in, and Herm and I became very close. I worked right beside him. Antonio Pierce, I kind of was Antonio Pierce's right hand when it came to recruiting, roster, recruiting, all of that. And we had a close relationship. And then this was, I think, 2020 or 21. I lose track of dates. I don't know. I left to Nebraska for a year with Frost and loved it there. Obviously, it didn't grow great at Nebraska. And I did player development at Nebraska. But Billy Napier called me. I was with Billy at Arizona State. He was the OC. And he called me and he said, hey, I have a position. Want you to come down to be the director of NIL and player development. NIL was just starting. This was when it just started. And my passion is helping players. So I was like, yeah, I'll take the job. I mean, I'd excel at player development. This NIL thing can just be a side thing, right? That I do part NIL, but mostly player development. So I'm driving from Arizona to Florida on the 26th of December. Napier just got the job. Napier gives me a number to call. It's the guy that runs the collective. I call him. So instead of going to Gainesville, I end up going to Orlando and meeting with this guy that runs the collective. And when I tell you, NIL was not big, but then that year with the transfer portal, opening, that's all I did. I did not do a glimpse of player development. All I did was NIL, raising money and, doing deals. So it was with the players and the families to begin with. The first year, then the second year of NIL, some agents started to get involved. And then a year, 2.5, it was all agents.
Let's use that word, Marcus. You and I have talked about this. Let's use that word in quotes, agents, because I say that because the one thing that I've spoken to Marcus recently, because we had an interaction on the professional side, is that I don't want to put a percentage, but a majority of the agents are not agents. Is that fair to say, Marcus? They are friends or people that are really taking advantage of these young men in this unique circumstance that they're in.
That is a great point. Absolutely. It's trainers, 7-on-7 coaches, and there's some good ones out there. So this is not a generalization, but there's a lot of them that are trainers, coaches, handlers, right, with quotes, mentors, family, friends, coaches, or there's another group of really good folks that have law degrees that are interested in sports that represent these guys, but they don't know athletics, right? So there's just a vast majority of a lot of people who don't know how athletic departments operate, how they run, how decisions are made, and I was dealing with a lot of those people. So it became difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of different cases going along. There's a lot of general managers now being hired, but it's grown so much, and I think it's getting better. That there's a bigger group of quality actual agents, like NFLPA certified agents. Those are the best guys I've ever dealt with when I was in my job.
Like me, right, Marcus?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I don't mean to blow your head up here, but yes, like you. You guys do it the right way.
Hadley fishing for compliments.
Right. Hey, it was a layup. Why not?
Well, Marcus, let me ask you one part of this. Because when this started, it was clear that it was supposed to be not pay for play. Now we've crossed over that line. What do you think as far as checks and balances, and how are we going to be able to put this genie back in the bottle to make sure it's done the way it was intended to be done?
The toothpaste is out of the tube, right? The old saying. It's going to have to come down to a players' union, and they're gonna have to have agents that are certified.
And I think they're going to be salaried. I think you're going to end up being employees, and I think it's this is the mess that's happened here now. Is that again, it's the NIL and it's the portal combined that create this mess. Interesting, Marcus.
Yes.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. When you first got into this space in 2020, 2021, correct me if I'm wrong. You were offering deals to guys. Now they're coming to you with demands when you're representing a university.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. And the landscape has changed. The rules have changed where, everybody was just trying to figure it out. There was a lot of gray areas, and there still is. I mean, this is I call it white space. Like, it's wide open. It's the Wild West. But every time that the portal opens, every single college coach, administrator, GM, athletic director has to deal with knowing that the guys who are good players on their team are going to be demanding more money. It's without a question. There's certain universities that I know and I talk to that are spending money in the portal right now, but I'm saying, hey, you might want to keep, a couple million aside and make sure you don't blow the budget, because you're going to have to retain your roster.
Right, the re-ups, right? The ones that you didn't budget for, but now that the space is opened up, you can't just wait for that player to ask. You've got to go ahead and be proactive about it, because otherwise they're going to leave.
Well, do you guys see it in a scenario where we're going to sign, if not 4-year deals, let's say 3-year deals, or it's contingent, you get paid until you leave? I mean, are we going to have more strict quote contracts and this stuff?
Well, they're like that now. I mean, if a player leaves,
but we're renegotiating on a yearly basis, though, it feels like.
Yeah, because the portal allows you, the player, to have the leverage to leave. But Marcus can share a story without talking about any names, and I would probably say this is the exception, not the rule, where you were telling me that you had you're advising a young man on a West Coast team, very, very prominent, could have gone anywhere and made a lot more money than he is. His current team upped it, but nowhere near what he could have made elsewhere. But that player looked at school, his teammates, his path to the NFL, all these different factors, and stayed at that university he got a raise, but he didn't get what he could have gotten fair market value. Do you see that happening more, Marcus, or do you see that being the exception, not the rule?
Right now, I would say it's going more towards, you see it more, but that's an exception in this particular case. But I'll say this: if you're a high school student athlete, if you're a college student athlete, right? You pick your school. You guys still there?
Yeah. Yep.
Did we lose you?
Did I lose you?
No, we hear you.
Marcus. We got you. All right, we'll see if we can't get him back on board.
Marcus, you there?
You know what's going on here? It's the college football powers infiltrating.
No, they're calling him, and he's trumping them and saying, all right, this is a university or a player, and he's got a big deal on the table, and we get trumped. It happens.
That's understanding your place. We know about it. All right. Well, we'll thank Marcus Walker. He's a big-time wheeling dealer trying to get stuff done. As I said, consults both players and programs in this NIL space that just continues to just explode in a way that I don't think anybody saw coming. I love his point on players' unions. I wonder about salary caps. I wonder about checks and balances. The NCAA is in over their skis with all of it. It's just, it has become...
It has to happen, Matt. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's... And I spoke with a general manager of a Power 4 team recently, and he referred to a non-Power 4 as today's JUCO.
Sure.
Like, you have to take it and embrace it, that you're a great university, a kid's going to come play, and those teams will elevate players, and then the player who is at the Power 4, that's a 4 or 5 star that for whatever reason can't get on the field, made some money, now will transfer down because they want to get the play time.
It's minor league baseball.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, stick around. We got a lot to talk about, including incentives in the NFL, how these agents make sure their guys get those at the end of their year, and when a player says, I'm not taking a pay cut, how uncomfortable is that conversation? You'll hear it from the agent next. All right, we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley. I'm Matt. We have a lot of ground to cover here, Mr. Hadley. Again, thanks to Marcus Walker for joining us a little bit earlier on. So the NFL season came to an end, And with the end
regular
of the
season, let's not
the regular
correct.
season. But listen, I know what I want to talk about with you. There's no incentives for the postseason that we're going to discuss. Week 18 is always a fun time to see the list of names who are close to getting incentives. None was bigger than Mike Evans. You guys probably saw last Sunday. Essentially, after the work was all done, Tampa wanted to make sure Mike Evans reached a number that paid him a $3 million incentive. So Baker Mayfield threw him a pass at the end of a game. Teammates jumped all over him, celebrated, and he's going to get his money. First of all, what do you think about that way of getting it? Because it's not within the flow of the game. Because some organizations might say, take a knee, we're not going to let you do it. I imagine both you and the agent community and players must love that, because maybe if all things are equal one day and I'm going to pick a team, knowing they're a pro player when it comes to that would help.
Yeah, I don't know if that's Tampa, generally speaking. I mean, let's separate this. Mike Evans is maybe the greatest face of the Buccaneers. And more importantly, he was tying a record in 1,000-yard seasons with Jerry Rice.
Right.
So, and they had, by winning this game, they had just made the playoffs and won the division. So I think all those factors in place, it was good mojo to have it happen, and good for the team and good for Mike Evans. But I think all those things collectively, I think if the team had lost the game or other things had gone south in prior games, I don't know they would be so quick to be throwing the ball at the end of a game like that. So I think all those things. But you look at Geno Smith. I think that's the better one of the two.
So let's talk about that one.
Okay.
Geno, he added $6 million.
Three $2 million
Correct.
levels of incentives.
For yards passing, for completion percentage, and for one other number that got him $6 million. So those are, quote,
wins.
Earning. And wins, right? They got 10 wins. So you had that on the right side. And on the other side, what did you think about the Cooper Rush with Dallas, who was trying to reach a percentage of snaps played? And maybe he gets there, maybe he doesn't, but they all of a sudden decide in the last week in Dallas, we want to take a look at Trey Lance. Are you, as the agent, calling foul?
Yes, but again, it's Dallas. It's Jerry Jones. And so, again, he does things, he beats to his own drum, and he does it his way. But again, you have to look at the organization. Look at Seattle. Geno has been a warrior for them. He's done wonderful. And again, you're about winning ball games, right? So they were all about, winning a game. And they did. Mm-hmm. So, and because of his play, they won it. So there were no shenanigans going on with that. He achieved that, and he led the team to victory. The Cooper Rush thing and the backup quarterback, all that stuff, you can bring the debate that they didn't play him because of that. I don't think Jerry Jones is looking at, this type of money and cares about it. He's got so much money.
It's a $250,000.
Yeah. And listen, to us,
sure,
big money. And to the agent world, big money.
Maybe
it's
big
a real
money.
Percentage.
Cooper Rush has made some money, but $250,000 is not
for a career backup, a journeyman, 100%. Yeah. So there's no doubt that it plays into it, and it hurts. When you have clients, and I've had them that have incentives in there, that they earn it earlier in the season, they earn it the last game. It's exciting when that happens.
When he doesn't get to play, though, do you put a call into him to just make sure, hey, I know you're not happy with this, but here's the deal. Let's not burn a bridge. Let's not say something out of the heat of the moment.
You have to when you're someone like that, because, again, you're not a star, right? There's where are you going next? Is there a home somewhere else, or is this your home for good? So you got to be smart about it. But you definitely, as an agent, as you get to these types of things, and even not just incentives, guys that are Pro Bowl players that don't get into the Pro Bowl. We had 2 players this year that very well deserving of the Pro Bowl. You can debate, but didn't get it. You really have to work with them psychologically, because, again, you don't want them to be upset with the team, be upset with anybody else, because it's just what happens. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you've got to look at the big picture, the macro, not just the micro. There'll be other opportunities. And, it's something that, again, it's one of the hats that we wear, that when you don't control that part of it. I always tell agents, you should have done a better job in doing one less, so therefore the incentive would have been achieved, right? But at the end of the day, you try to be fair about it when you negotiate it in advance. And, if it works out, great. If teams like Tampa or Seattle put you in a position to get it, even better. But, I try not to think that teams intentionally hide you or do stuff because you're talking about a few $100,000, which in the landscape of the budget is very small.
So let's talk about potential pay cuts, and I want to ask you about a contract situation. Derek Carr, who's making, I think it's $40+ million a year, says he won't take a pay cut. Explain to me again how that works if they say, well, we're cutting your pay or we're looking to do something different. What kind of leverage does he have knowing A, he's been hurt, play has been up and down, they're not very good, but they also know the salary cap situation, it would be a big punch to them if he decided, I'm going to stand strong, you're going to have to cut me, they're going to have to deal with all the dead money.
I think, first of all, I think it's a bad PR move for any player, Derek Carr included, to take the stance publicly that I'm not going to do something. Even if you're not going to do something, let the agent be the bad person. All you have to say publicly when a reporter asks you that question is, listen, all things are on the table. I'm willing to discuss it with the team, whatever's best for the team and me collectively. I hope we can come to some sort of meeting of the minds. He comes across that he cares about the team. He's business-oriented. Behind the scenes, he tells his agent, we're not budging. And the team knows he's not budging. Right. But again, there's an optics to it. And I'm a big believer in that there's a way to present it. I always tell people, let me be the bad guy if I need to be and say stuff about it. But I think he could have done it in a better way. So we're not discussing it right now. He comes across as the good guy and let the offseason begin. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, so be it. He can blame it half on the team that, hey, they weren't willing to do things that I wanted to do to protect my future. But to say I need to get all I can get, I think that's a bad optic thing publicly. Internally, go for it. Yeah. You should get all you can get.
All right, let me ask you about the Falcons wide receiver Drake London, who, as of this past Monday, had an opportunity, was eligible to sign an extension. He's projected to make 4 years, $124 million with 70 in guarantees. Young player, he's 23, he's played 3 years. He just really broke out again, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 100-plus catches. What would the incentive be for the team, just to beat the market to the next guy, to try to stay ahead, to sort of limit some of the cost? And what would be the incentive to Drake other than, all right, I get my guarantees and I know if I get hurt, I get it?
Yeah, and let me explain this to you, everybody, that first of all, it's not as of today or yesterday. It's when the third year begins. Okay, so the fourth year, begins. He's finished 3 years.
So the new league year begins.
The new league year, which will be in March.
Right.
So it's not today.
Okay.
But in discussion purposes, it could happen now. Again, it all depends on players. So we're in a situation, we're dealing with the same scenario. If it's a player that was drafted in the first round, that team has this offseason to exercise the fifth-year option. So that could be a large number for cap purposes. So it incentivizes a team that, hey, we're going to have to exercise it, which means guaranteeing it. We can reduce that hit 2 years from now. We can invest in our players now, just like the Braves did. They could have waited through arbitration on a number of players, but decided to spread it out. These guys are our future. It's also good when you have a good player, and it's good for the locker room. So you try to make it a win-win situation. Why does a player do it? Because he gets X amount of millions of dollars today. He doesn't have to bank on the future, and he knows he's got a home. The flip side of it is a player that's taken in the second round or beyond only had a 4-year deal. So there's only 1 year left. Now, they can do a franchise tag and things like that, but there's only 1 year that you're guaranteed to have that player. That team is also incentivized to say, hey, let's throw out that last year of $1 million. Let's do a new deal. Some will ask for a severe discount. Some will ask for no discount. Like, this is what the players earned. It helps us up cap-wise, cash flow. So it's happening across the board. And again, I think it also comes down to position. I think it comes down to the player, what he brings to that team, not just what he does statistically, but what he brings to that locker room, stability, and someone like Drake London, I think that's someone that they need to invest in because he is part of this future Falcon franchise, wherever they're going. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's something that they need to address, and I think they'll try to. But again, it all comes out about supply and demand and what they're asking for and whether it fits within their budget.
Spoken like a true agent. That's why this guy's the best in the business. I will remind you, you can find Deals and Deadlines just by searching it up on any podcast platform. New episodes drop every Friday, and you can always find us on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. Hadley, Happy New Year.
You too, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. To you guys, thanks for joining us. We'll do it again next week on Deals and Deadlines.